In the kingdom where power decides fate, a young prince was born under a forbidden curse, one that bound his soul to the darkness itself. As whispers of betrayal echoed through the royal halls, those once loyal turned their blades against the crown. The only one who dared to save him was a mysterious witch, whose own heart carried a secret more dangerous than any spell. Together they defied destiny, fleeing into a world where love, magic, and revenge intertwine. But every curse comes with a price, and as the prince's power grows, so does the shadow threatening to consume them both. This is not a tale of heroes or villains, it's a story of survival, desire, and the haunting cost of redemption. Under the scorching sun, a girl was crawling on the cracked sand. A drop of sweat ran down her face, and when the drop touched her chin, it slowly began to fall. When it fell, it left behind a whistling sound. Looking at the sky, the main character's thoughts were filled only with denial, gripping the round accessory. She couldn't understand how this could be that heroine turned out to be Alicia Sirius Lane, the beloved youngest daughter and the first girl of the family. In the last 2000 years, it seemed like the girl was in an ideal family, a greenhouse flower that was protected, and not allowed to leave the mansion walls, always shy and stuttering, afraid of people and reading books. That was the real Alicia, and the main character was perfectly aware of her situation. Despite her female gender, she was recognized as the Marquise's daughter. She managed to live as the only lady in the house. And all because she was useful to the family out of fear of her father, the girl could not oppose warm wind and memories inside. A man approached the heroine and told her it was an honor to meet the lady with a slight bow. Gregory from the Earl Baker family introduced himself, stuttering. The protagonist bowed, also saying her name. An influential person in the imperial capital and an influential person in the north, the marriage negotiations between both families seemed to be going smoothly, but then everything changed when Gregory was caught cheating, and the situation took an unexpected turn. He deceived his married girlfriend, and her husband challenged him to a duel the hero could not refuse but survived. However, the Baker family, left disabled, refused to accept it. The legal procedure to dissolve the engagement dragged on for 8 long years, and when her family finally won, Alicia was 25 years old. The age when people started to see her as something old and worn out. The father said sternly that the next marriage was already decided and his daughter would marry Duc Tessen. After such words, the girl was stunned. Leocard Tessen, ruler of Tessen, land of gold and death, the emperor's half-brother and serial killer. Of grand duchesses, he already had 6 wives. The first, on the way to Tessen after the wedding, suffered a mysterious death. The second, unable to endure Tessen's harsh conditions, returned to her family, but soon died of an unknown illness. The third died in a sudden accident. The fourth Grand Duchess fell down the stairs. The fifth suddenly died after drinking tea. The sixth also died under mysterious circumstances. Marrying him means dying. Even the household heroine knows this. The only thing she could think was that she would not marry, that she did not want to die, that she was afraid. But suddenly a voice interrupted her. Her daughter really wanted to say something. Alicia looked up but couldn't say anything. The man's stern gaze frightened the girl. Tears ran down her face. She sighed and tried to say the words and finally said she didn't want to. The door closed and she was told, the main character, to return to her rooms. Looking out the window, the heroine thought that recently the sky was completely clear, and now it was all covered with clouds and raining. A maid wearing glasses was standing next to the girl, and she was fixing the main character's hair. Finally the silence was broken and she said, "Ma'am." With a hint of sadness, she asked not to get married, and then, as if frightened by her own boldness, she covered her mouth with her hand and, bowing, she began to apologize. Alicia asked to be left alone and told her not to worry. The Grand Duke sent the marriage contract along with a gift box. The girl reached out her hand toward the box. With a slight movement, it was opened. There were many dazzling decorations inside. The main character was amazed by the skill with which the work was done, and then her attention was drawn to a large that was a pendant. It looks as old as an imperial relic. Alicia opened it, and it turned out it wasn't a pendant at all, but a watch. Suddenly the hand made a strange sound and everything started to glow. The room was immersed in reddish and dark tones. The girl spun around the room as if she had become the numbers on that clock, and then she rushed downward and fell into the void. When she got up, the heroine didn't understand where she was. Something strange pricked the area under her eye. Having touched it, she thought, "Is this really a needle? But why is there some liquid on it?" At that moment, a growl was heard. Alicia couldn't move and only felt fear, and that's how she ended up in hell. A red light shone among the stone mountains. But inside the cave, on the contrary, blue tones predominated. The main character was hiding behind a large rock. She peeked out a little and thought, "Great, all the monsters are fast asleep. And if she wants to escape now, it's her only chance." After all, that day the girl died. More precisely, not even that, she was dead. It seems crazy, but that's how it seems that Alicia became immortal, or was so her whole life. But even a small cut took a whole week to heal, and now the girl literally heals in a day. Even if her skin is torn off, the heroine realized she couldn't die. Even if she wanted to, pressing herself against the stones, she shouted, "Forgive me." At first she begged for mercy, but it didn't help. Monsters have no feelings. And then the girl got angry at what they had done to her. And that was in vain too. She rebelled, resisted, and finally decided to escape, but the main character isn't sure she can do it. What if they catch her? What if the monster gets angry? Through tears, Alicia realized she was very scared. Then she claimed she could handle it and jumped resolutely, thinking she could do it. She ran toward the exit with all her strength. It was getting closer. The heroine already doubted if she was on the right path, but she didn't plan to stop, despite the abrasions and pain. And finally the light appeared. The girl's eyes lit up and she thought, here it is. She ran exclaiming joyfully, yes, just a little more, and she'll be free. Finally, I'll get out of this hell and will return home smiling. At the light, sharp claws appeared before the girl's eyes. And suddenly blood gushed out as she fell. The main character realized she had failed again. There were 2 wolves standing in front of her. They began to eat him mercilessly, tearing the fabric, a tragedy that repeats over and over. She couldn't escape and became a punching bag for the monsters through tears. Alicia thought, don't kill me because of my clumsiness. The young man couldn't finish off the victim immediately, a day that repeated itself so many times that the heroine couldn't count which death it was. And in that case, she wouldn't have died even if she had married the Duke. What a pity she isn't the perfect bride for him. This would be a great opportunity to get rid of the killer's bad reputation. Of the great duchesses, it's strange that they are taking so long to eat today, thought the girl, and how she hates pain. Wait a minute, if the main character hates pain, she can just kill them first. Why did it take so long to realize something so simple? If Alicia doesn't want to die, she just needs to kill the monsters first. The bones scattered on the ground were hard and sharp enough to be used, and unlike the girl who healed even after being wounded, the monsters' lives had ended. It was a battle where from the start the heroine was the victor. Starting with the weak pups, one by one, gradually the bone went straight into the throat. The girl pressed harder and harder. She felt no compassion for anyone, just as no one felt compassion for her. The monster's stone body cracked, and only stones remained of it. The main character snorted with disgust and then said, to tell the truth, that's what this pathetic monster Alicia is worth, who was found in the monster's lair right after waking up. In the first place, she hid the watch, which was the reason she was there. In a lair where almost no daylight penetrated, they were the only thing that allowed her to keep track of time. Only 20 days have passed. But how many times has the heroine managed to die? How is this possible? It's impossible. She kicked the stone and screamed over and over. The stones flew to pieces and she continued over and over. This monster devoured her, ate her alive, piece by piece. But in the end, she was the only one who survived. Do you have any idea how painful it is? The stone cracked from the blows, and finally, Alicia fell silent. Surprised, in the crack appeared a shiny golden stone. She leaned closer and picked up the stone. The heroine looked at it. There was only one question. What could it be? But it was impossible to see anything. The button shone with the same stone. The man looked out the window silently. Suddenly, a servant entered the room. He wanted to tell them an important matter. The hero interrupted him, saying that the Marquis's carriage had just passed through the main gate. Did someone die again? The servant replied, not exactly. The Marquis's daughter disappeared. The main character only said with a hysterical smile how foolish it was. And she is really missing. Did she run away out of fear, or was she destined to die at that moment? The girl with the spear jumped and aimed at the monster. Only hatred shone in her eyes. Yes, she hit the bullseye. That's a success. Alicia survived hell and beyond. She lived quite well here. The girl was searching for something among the stones. The sound of claws scraping the stones was heard. The main character finally found the shining stones. As soon as she did, the amazing guest with claws jumped out of his seat. He decided to attack Alicia from behind, but his fist hit the ground. The heroine grabbed him by the ear and asked who he was pressing down on his head with both hands. She shouted, how dare you touch someone else's prey? Even in hell, theft is punished. Extending the spear, the girl asked if he understood. The surprising guest covered his mouth with his hand and then shouted, please have mercy. The main character was puzzled. The monster spoke, or something like that. The spear crashed into the ground, almost hitting the spot between the man's legs. The man quickly got on his knees and started banging his head against the ground. Apologizing, he promised he would never come near that place again as long as his life was spared. But Alicia just looked at him surprised and squatting down asked where they were. He answered that Elec was in the west. Could this really be a real name, she thought, since the girl found herself here? The only thing she learned was that this place is called hell. And that was just from a phrase she read in a book, that the sky there is crimson and the rocks there are black. All of this is from a religious text, heaven and hell. After scattering the precious stones, Alicia asked what they were. A strange stone that gives power when eaten. The man said, oh, this is a mana stone. Is it really possible to leave something so valuable lying on the ground? It's great, because it's the biggest mana stone. If the hero had it, he would have become even stronger. The main character said calmly that she would give him this stone. He asked, surprised, if it was true. The girl also answered calmly, yes, if he answers a couple of questions that interest her. To get more powerful mana stones, hunting wild animals is not enough. Their stones are random byproducts and there is a limit, but demons accumulate and control the mana level, and the stronger the demon is, the bigger the stone after their death. Noe in the east, Alec in the west, Fez in the south, Kala in the north. The lords of these 4 castles are considered the most powerful in hell. There was an angel at the gate towering over the demons. Seeing this, the main character opened his eyes wide. In the hall, a figure was seen on a throne. The creature said, welcome to the western castle, Alec, before he could introduce himself. A spear flew at him. The heroine said she wasn't interested in empty performances. Loud footsteps were heard throughout the hall. The girl looked at the throne and said, it has a decent size, and you should always strive to get the biggest in the end. She started thinking about where to go next, east or north. But it doesn't matter where you go because there is plenty of time here, the main character thought. Looking at the shiny stone in her hands, as soon as Alicia said it, she felt a strange sensation inside her, which I would like to stop. The girl opened her eyes and saw a chandelier golden that looked familiar to her. Alicia looked. quickly around and realized that this was her room. There were no longer scratches on her body. She was lying in bed. Suddenly she jumped out of bed. The heroine grabbed her head and went back. And then opening her eyes, I saw my reflection. Unable to believe what she saw, she shouted, "What is this? How could she look younger?" Touching her cheeks, she wondered if it could be because of the magical mana stones and why her ankle hurt so much. Did Lisha really sprain it? She stared for a moment in surprise. After all, there is nothing on her ankle except bones. And the arms somehow are not right. What kind of fragile body is this? The protagonist thought it seems that after returning from hell, she lost all her power. There was nothing left, and what a job it was to collect the magical stones. A soft knock was heard at the door. The heroine suddenly was puzzled by this. The doormaid introduced herself as Daisy and asked if she could come in. The main character worriedly thought about what she should do. The girl ran quickly and silently to her bed, and covering herself with a blanket answered that she could come in. She greeted Lady Alicia good morning, and asked if she had slept well. The heroine replied, "Yes, of course, and how are you?" before the girl could finish speaking. She jumped out of bed shouting Daisy. She wondered how old her maid would be now. The heroine calmly answered that she was 22 years old. When the girl asked what happened, the main character lost consciousness. She returned to her 17-year-old past. There was a woman sitting in a chair near the bed and a maid standing there. A hand moved toward the girl's face. At that moment she regained consciousness and said she was very thirsty. The heroine exclaimed, surprised Alicia, while the maid remained calmly with a tray on which there was a glass of water. The woman asked with emotion in her voice to drink slowly because even water can cause choking. And anyway, what happened? Why did she faint so suddenly? But the main character just replied, "Thank you, Mom." The woman was puzzled. Memories flashed in her eyes, how she pushes everyone aside despite the prohibitions after all, really. Was there any place in this mansion where she couldn't go? The servants shouted that the lady was heading to the south wing and that they should call the market. And brought an illegitimate son secretly from Madam. Someone could end their days as a corpse today. The woman asked threateningly if that girl was Alicia. The maid shouted that she would explain everything to her lady, but she knelt down and said hello. She said with a smile that she was Alicia's mother. And the maid covered her mouth with her hands. But something else went through the girl's mind, how they explained to her that everything she enjoyed, it wasn't hers, and it's worth appreciating what is given, and under no circumstances should you wish for more. At that moment the girl suddenly hid behind the maid's back. The woman asked if she really was so surprised by the unexpected visit. But the lady was already getting ready to leave so the girl could rest comfortably. Think about it, is Alicia really the daughter of such a beautiful and kind woman? Her very existence is already a sin because the girl is a symbol of betrayal, and even after that the heroine understood that her mother really loved her. She couldn't call her anything else but Marchioness, and the main character deeply regretted it in hell. She asked for another glass of water and repeated again, "Mom." The Marchioness said with a radiant smile that she would bring everything now. "And do you need anything else besides water? Because Mom will do everything," Daisy thought, because my lady had just spoken without hesitation. And finally called the lady Mom. Can a person change so much in an instant? It was as if she had died and come back from the dead. The girl touched her mother's hand and asked if her boyfriend had been chosen. It was Gregory Barker Wright. The woman asked, surprised, how she knew. The Marchioness replied that Alicia was still too young. The main character admitted that she didn't like Gregory at all. However, the marriage between nobles is a contract between families. "Can Mother help with this?" The woman said firmly that this matter should be left in her hands. And she didn't like this candidate either, although his appearance and character are different. Gregory reminds her a lot of his father in his youth. She hugged her daughter and told her not to worry about anything. "Mom will never let her marry if Alicia doesn't want to." My father's office door slammed open. There was silence. The man continued writing something. Then came the demand to immediately release my mother. She burst into the office without saying a word to the butler. What rude behavior! The daughter should return to her room immediately, but the girl asked if that was the right thing to say. After the lady had been placed under house arrest, His Excellency Marquis Waldemar Lane said Alicia coldly ordered to be careful with words because there are ears everywhere, even in the mansion. The girl responded that it was simply ridiculous to say that her mother was sick and resting. She slammed the table and shouted that they had locked up her mother because she was against her daughter's engagement. Locking the lady of the house in a room and then worrying about her reputation is nonsense. The main character said calmly, "What if the Marquis's daughter goes and hits her fiancé on the head? What will then happen to her father's precious reputation?" A burst and a scream were heard. "How dare!" The heroine threatened the mansion's owner after the slap. The girl responded coldly that she was still holding back to avoid hitting him right now. Her eyes shone with hatred. The hero also noticed this strangeness in her gaze. After all, something was wrong from the beginning of the conversation. An obedient girl who never contradicted her father. Suddenly she burst into the office and started looking at me like this. Eyes like those of a warrior who has been through hell and has returned to earth. What is the hero thinking? The girl trembled with just one look. She couldn't have changed so easily, or maybe the teenage rebellion came too late. That's how kids are arguing with the head of the house is a serious offense, and she should think about her behavior in her room. At that moment a conversation was heard, and then the boy spit out his tea in surprise, shouting, "How can a girl talk like that?" This guy turned out to be the main character's brother, Harry Molston Lane. The second son of the Marquis shouts were heard everywhere that the sister had been kicked out of the mansion, but she calmly said this: how can a young lady not worry about losing her father's favor? But the heroine only asked about her mother. The brother explained that she had already left her room, but the woman tried to enter the south wing upon learning what had happened, but her older brother Felix Henry Lane stopped her. Although with great difficulty, Alicia thought, yes, it must be pretty hard for the older brother, tilting her head to one side. The girl asked if Harry had made sure she was okay so she could tell their mother. The brother replied that he came here because he was worried about her. The main character froze in surprise, and then asked if they had ever been close. Smiling, he replied that he loved his little sister very much. The girl thought all this was strange. This brother thinks of her like that, but maybe that's not so bad. The protagonist is a coward and has a bad temper. She didn't believe Harry could love her. It's good that she went back to the past. Alicia asked how far along her engagement was. The brother replied that the negotiations between the families had concluded, and that all that was left was the approval of the imperial family, and then the announcement. The heroine thought, the emperor's approval? She asked her brother if he remembered her debut in society, and he replied with a smile, of course. Alicia fell right in the middle of the debutante ball and became everyone's laughingstock. The girl blushed and thought there was nothing to worry about and you should be more careful next time. But she heard a giggle from one of the heroes. After all, the first person who laughed at the main character was Gregory Barker. Harry asked if his sister wanted him to finish off this Gregory right now. Smiling, Alicia replied that it was impossible. But thanks for the idea, and if you don't kill him, you can just challenge him to a duel, changing the subject of the conversation. The girl handed the letter to her brother. The man asked what it was. She calmly asked to deliver this to Duke Tessin, and Harry was stunned. He looked at the purple envelope in surprise. What could Alicia be thinking? Asked the boy. But the girl just asked with a smile that he do it immediately. The brother will help his beloved sister, right? The sheet flew. A voice was heard: negotiations between the royal family and the Greys. This is top secret. The letter said that the heroine had received a warning letter that her fiancé was in poor health. The hero wondered where such information could have leaked from the assistant. Roderick replied that His Highness was at a wedding, and that it definitely was not the Duke's property. The protagonist thought for a moment, and then told Henrik to stay at the estate while Roderick prepared for the trip. Asked in astonishment if he was really going to meet Sirius in person on the last day of autumn at the 7 Stones of Sorrows next to the Great Temple. A thought crossed a man's mind, and then he calmly replied that it was Sirius who requested to meet there, and he would only bring one companion. When the servants hesitated, a threatening voice was heard loudly. Leocard Tessin let out a deep sigh and leaned heavily in his chair, and then I thought, what a ridiculous letter. Congratulations on your first engagement. Ha, who is this Sirius? Tessin wondered. The carriage moved slowly along the forest path. The main character asked how much longer until they reached the Great Temple of Sorrows, and the maid replied that they were almost there. Alicia exhaled and said it was longer than she thought. Good thing we came in Mom's car, otherwise in the heroine's carriage. She surely would have gotten sick as expected from Adele. They didn't hesitate for a moment. As soon as she said this, the dizziness began. Suddenly everything swam before my eyes. The carriage started bouncing violently. Daisy grabbed her head, apparently hitting it hard. Could it really be that all this is due just to a couple of obstacles on the road? The girl is so young. Why does she feel so weak? Well, it doesn't matter. She thought, what happened at all? It looks like an ambush. But who would dare attack the Marquis' carriage? The maid jumped up. The heroine shouted at her not to open the door, but it was already too late. Daisy had already opened it. Suddenly something thin flew toward her neck and her glasses bounced in the air. Alicia ran to her friend, shouting and begging her to wake up. Then I saw the poison dart. Incredible. How did the attackers manage to hit such a small target? The smell of cinnamon and cypress could be heard. There is only one poison that smells like that. But that poison shouldn't exist yet, she whispered. Musto. Suddenly a male voice said, hello, his name is Musto the Knight. He explained that the girl's life was not in danger and that she was simply in a deep sleep. He explained the need to use approximate methods. Hoping to achieve understanding, the hero coldly asked the lady to get out of the carriage and then asked if it would be better to call her Sirius. Eyes the color of pure water, white skin and hair like gold, they said. The main character inherited no royal traits and looked frightening, but he is quite handsome. He looked at the heroine and couldn't believe she sent such a crazy letter. People will think Tessin is attacking a defenseless woman. Mentioned that Lady Lauren of the Greys had a weak heart. With a smile, the main character asked, is that true? Pointed out that the 7 Stones of Dolor originally served as a sundial, and only her close friends and her maid know the truth about her. The morning and the day belong to the living, and the night and dawn belong to the dead. Then, while the sun shines, non-human creatures cannot enter the ruins. She asked him if he had ever been inside. The man replied that it was his first time. And it turned out that the main character as well. He moved forward quickly, then he turned around and asked if the girl would like to enter with him, but Alicia replied that she would come after him. The trap is inside, or she simply won't be able to enter there. Tessin decided that even if it was a trap, he would simply go through it, and when the man entered, the heroine replied that he was still a man. The man asked what the heroine meant. She explained that if he couldn't even take a step, this would mean that the main character is not human at all. Yes, seriously, she even believes those rumors that Tessin is a demon. Smiling, the heroine said that His Highness is very brave, but if these ruins are real, and hell really exists, in that case, if she went to hell and came back, she would still be a human being. There was only one question. Alicia was still human. The foot landed quietly on the ground, and the girl also entered. She smiled and declared that she was still human. The main character Thought about how strange the heroine was, she exclaimed with a smile that thanks to him she received the answer she was looking for. And suddenly she realized how close they were, their faces to each other stepping back. She said she needed to introduce herself properly. After bowing, she stated that she was the one who sent him the letter. And her name is Alicia Sirius Lane. Tessin calmly replied that he knew she was the Marquis's daughter, right? She replied that in that case the matter would be simplified, and falling to her knees she said Duke Richard Tessin opened his eyes wide in shock when a young woman placing a hand over her heart and extending the other toward the man proposed marriage. It occurred to him that this woman was more than just strange, she was completely crazy. Richard thought angrily. The man said rudely, did he really think she had come all this way to hear that nonsense? And walking away said he had just wasted his time. The girl turned around and shouted at him to wait. Getting up from her knees, she asked if he wouldn't listen to her proposal in full. Wasn't he curious to know how Alicia knew about the royal marriage? Tensen replied dryly that no, this is wrong. He should have been intrigued. Suddenly the main character stopped abruptly and sweat appeared on his face. He didn't understand what was happening. After all, the next Lua cycle is still very far away. The hero really has gone too far from the territory. Leaning against a tree, he thought he needed to return to the estate immediately. The main character was simply wondering if everything was okay when there was no response. He extended his hand. Noticing this, Richard looked angrily. The man shouted at her not to touch him and pushed the girl to the ground as if he hadn't expected it. Alicia looked at her frozen hand. She only responded quietly that it was okay, and looked resolutely at the main character. He realized something was wrong and that the heroine clearly was plotting something, and indeed she firmly grabbed Tessin's hand. She shouted that she would help him get to the carriage. The main character simply looked at his hand silently. And then a pleasant revelation occurred to him that the sound that had been tormenting the hero all this time had stopped. It could really all be because of this stranger. Alicia couldn't understand if Richard was angry. Because she had grabbed him abruptly, the girl slowly began to let go of his hand, but the hero did not allow it and grabbed Alicia's fingers, and then pulled her roughly toward himself. The main character hit his chest when he asked her not to let go of his hand. She was completely perplexed. The two were sitting on a bench holding hands and looking away. It was an awkward situation for both. They were really going to talk while holding hands. He replied gloomily that yes, that was a condition to continue the conversation. Uncomfortable, the man rested his face on his hand and asked what the girl was offering him. The main character was glad and thought finally he should marry her, then the girl would give predictions about the future 4 times a year. Richard thought, yes, that's absurd. Why should he even believe in the predictions of a barely known heroine? She confidently replied that the letter she sent was accurate enough for the hero to come here. The man was silent for a moment and then spoke, but if the girl had been sane, she wouldn't have asked to marry Tessin. Everything is much simpler. Who does she want to eliminate? Without thinking, the main character answered Gregory Barker. Richard knew leaving his home would cost him dearly, but this woman might be the key to his curse, so we have to hold on to this deal and accept it. He replied that it was fine, but they wouldn't marry immediately. He proposed getting engaged. That's enough to deal with the Barkers and the hero. He will be the one to address her as future Archduchess. The protagonist asked if he needed anything else, to which Alicia replied she trusted him completely, because she usually wanted a lot. He calmly replied he would keep that in mind and continued saying that then they finished. The girl pointed at her hand and told Richard to let go. The man slowly turned his gaze to his hands and after replying, okay, the heroine abruptly pulled her hand toward herself and smiling said she counted on his cooperation. The protagonist responded the same way. Flyers flew all over the city. The boy shouted extra extra Archduke Tessin got engaged to a young woman from a northern house. No one has heard of her, but they say the Archduke is so in love that he lost his mind and gave her an engagement gift. Bernardo's latest masterpiece. Whilst the castle of Ruder Villa Lalisa with the golden room, even the territory of the Echeverria estuary, an important territory between the capital and the south, everything is transmitted in an instant. But who is this Alicia? Even if she trains like crazy without the magic stones, everything will be in vain. An angry brother approached her. He pointed at the flyer and shouted what it was. It said that Lady Alicia would become the Countess of Echeverria. She wondered, surprised, if the news had really already reached the north. Alicia grabbed the flyer and said indignantly, I am the main character, then why does the article only talk about the Duke? Harry shouted that she said she was going to pray in the Great Temple. What the hell had the heroine done? Lied about the trip because she was under house arrest? They say the new guild has found a mountain of salt and now is looking for investors. Suddenly the flyer was snatched from the girl's hands. The brother angrily declared he was tired of watching. Exhaling, Alicia said he himself had brought it to show it. Harry continued asking how his sister had gotten into that situation, but the girl's gaze drifted away. The servant said respectfully, My lady, the horse you requested is ready. Without expecting such speed? She asked again. And her brother answered with a smile that his little sister had never ridden a horse, but she no longer listened. Instead, she ran straight to the horse. Alicia quickly jumped into the saddle and with a satisfied smile said she had learned. The boy thought incredulously, this can't be. The sound of hooves was heard. The girl directed her gaze toward her brother, and she asked him if it was already time to leave, but they were interrupted by a servant who ran shouting, Young master, the guy told him to go to the main building immediately. After asking what happened, the hero turned his gaze toward Alicia and hesitated, then explained it was hard to explain everything there. First, they needed to return to the main house. The brother said with a smile it was already time to leave. She returned the smile and waved. Harry ran and shouted he would be back, so don't let him harm her. Finally, the main character was left alone and the horse exploded. The girl slowly inhaled the fresh air and then exhaled sharply. Her gaze shining with confidence. At first, the heroine tried to jump the stairs 12 steps at a time. The maids managed to catch Alicia. She still had muscle memory, but no matter how hard she tried, without strength everything was difficult. The girl grabbed a tree branch and hung from it, then climbed higher and proudly thought that so far everything was going well. Taking off, she jumped her foot, stepped right on a branch and jumping again. Alicia thought she had returned from hell. She missed it more than anyone, but the thoughts were interrupted because her hand began to slip and suddenly the main character flew down holding her stomach. She kept thinking she missed the magic stones. After all, the power they grant can't be obtained just like that. The main character approached her and asked if everyone in her family trained like that. She turned around and said hesitantly, "Your Grace." Extending her hand explained that he had come for the graduation ceremony. Extending his hand in response, Alicia said, "Thank you." Richard's sleeve was reflected in her eyes. That is a button with such a magical stone. Suddenly it was heard. A question about what the main character was doing. She answered abruptly that she was simply busy, and shook the leaves off herself for her. "This is just an exercise, although this kind of training should be introduced in the cavalry." Then he offered to remove the leaves from the lady's hair. He started looking for leaves in her hair, quickly running his hands through it. The man, extending his hand toward the sheet, said, "I apologize," and slowly took it out. He continued calmly, "That's all," but the main character kept staring at the button. She stood on tiptoe. Richard said interrogatively, "Lady Alicia?" And then he stumbled and began to fall. The main character fell along with him. She blushed and thought that at first she was imagining it, but now the girl is sure. Alicia grabbed the boy's hand, asked to be let go. The heroine spoke, "Your Highness, she is only interested in the twin, and she would like Richard to give it to her. After all, this is definitely a magical stone." The girl is sure of it. The main character knew this was what she needed, but Richard calmly replied that it was a pity. The object is passed down from generation to generation in the Tezen house, so he fears it won't be easy. Alicia answered that that was true, but in her thoughts she was thinking that thing could be stolen. Blushing, the man asked to be put down. The heroine jumped abruptly and apologized. She said that surely a similar gemstone could be found in Tezen and promised to send it as a gift, but only if such a stone is found. She doesn't promise anything. The main character said happily that just knowing of its existence already made her happy, and running after the man she proposed going together, and continued with a slight smile, offering to thank him right now for the future gift. She said there would be no snow this winter, and Richard turned around surprised. Alicia added that instead a strange snowstorm will hit the country between late March and early April. If a snowstorm suddenly hits in March or April, many people in the area could die and preparations are necessary. The girl smiled and said it was a gift, and that she wouldn't deduct it from the bill. The protagonist looked at her suspiciously, but she has such a confident expression on her face that it must be true. Exhaling, the man said he hadn't given her the stone yet, but he was already grateful, because thanks to her it was possible to minimize the damage to the territory radiant. She said she hoped this would help. When they approached the house, the servants were already waiting for them. Daisy said calmly that the hero had arrived. She handed him the box and said that was exactly the item your lordship had requested. Bowing, Richard said softly that he needed to say something to Lady Alicia, but the butler interrupted them, announcing that Viscount Felix, he was already expected in the main house's living room. The couple began to talk. The heroine asked if he had come to see the extension, and the man replied that he had come to see Lady Alicia, and coldly looking at the servants, he ordered them to leave. She made a slight bow and replied, "Yes, Your Grace." While everyone walked away, the main character quietly called Daisy, made a signal that she had finished writing, and asked for the horse to be returned to the stable. The girl felt in agreement, and Alicia whispered words of gratitude. The hero asked if everything was ready. The girl turned to him fearfully. When he said that finally it was her turn, a box began to open before the main character's eyes. Inside was the set of rubies of Duchess Margarita with bright eyes. Alicia asked if this was really true for her. The ruby relics of Duchess Margarita are traditionally passed down along with the title of Countess of Echeverry. These adornments can be worn when formal attire is required as the Countess of Echeverry. Crossing his arms over his chest and smiling slightly, Richard asked if it was necessary to be so serious, and then asked how much she knew about the imperial family. Alicia was surprised by the question, but answered calmly that the late emperor had 5 sons and 1 daughter, including His Majesty the current emperor. The second prince, the Duke of Wales, died in an accident 7 years ago, and the third, the Marquis of Lennox, the fourth Count Esteban. The fifth, His Grace, the Duke of Tessen, Princess Louisa, now Duchess of Iserlin, is her sister. The man said she seemed to know the basics well. For anything more beyond this, the imperial court will appoint her a tutor. Speaking of her creative exercise program, he commented that it would be better to keep it hidden. The protagonist said that she would see him at the investiture ceremony. Richard reminded her that as soon as she chose the color of the dress, she should inform the ducal residence, bowing slightly. He said he would appreciate it if she did. Then he whispered something to the main character. Alicia asked, surprised, if that was true. The man assured he saw it with his own eyes, and added, sitting on his horse, that he hoped this information would be useful to her. After these words, the main character left quickly while watching him. The girl thought he had disappeared like the wind. The heroine thought that Richard arrived so suddenly and without warning. But maybe it was better than she thought. Even before entering the mansion, the servants began to ask questions in chorus about how they had managed to get so close. They continued interrogating her, looking worried at my lady's face. If the lady was okay, what exactly did they say to her? These girls couldn't say a single word to the main character. And now they have caused an uproar. How dare they? Alicia shouted for everyone to leave except Daisy. The girl was burning with anger, and when everyone left, only one servant remained. Daisy said calmly could prepare some tea. Hugging the box calmly replied that it was not necessary now that he had things to do, and then calmly addressed the girl by her name and ordered her to get ready to leave immediately. After all, they are going to the Echeverria estate. At that moment his lordship whispered in the main character's ear that Mark Slane would not return soon, enraged his majesty by opposing the dissolution of his engagement to Gregorio, then in the near future. My father will be trapped in the capital, so it's time to act, and the first thing we have to do is leave this housing development. The mansion doors creaked open, a golden carriage entered. The hero quickly descended the steps, wondering what that noise was. Harry quickly put on his tailcoat and asked if his father had arrived. His mother asked him to come down more carefully. The older brother asked if Mom had heard anything separately, but she only assured that nothing had been told to her. He always demands that all the household members come out to greet him, otherwise he is not happy, then assured that if he had known beforehand, he would have prepared. Suddenly the brother froze and said, "Wait." The image of his little sister appeared before him. The hero asked where Alicia was, but before they could answer him, the door suddenly opened. An angry father burst into the mansion. He paid no attention to the servants' greetings but only shouted Alicia. The man demanded that his daughter come out immediately. All the servants calmly responded that she was not there. Gritting his teeth, he wondered how he dared if that scoundrel hadn't even come out to greet his father. The servants asked anxiously what matter his lordship was at the south wing, but the hero just pushed everyone aside, shouting, approaching his daughter's room. He roughly pulled the doorknob and bursting in shouted, "Alicia Sirius Lane." To his surprise, the room was empty and dark. The eldest son whispered to his father that they were watching anxiously. The father said that the Marquis's daughter had disappeared from the estate and that no one in the family knew where she was. A voice came from the crowd saying that she had gone to Echeverria. The hero asked what she had just said. A woman in a yellow dress approached him radiant. She simply repeated that his beautiful daughter had gone to Echeverria. Sitting on the sofa, the man asked what the hell had happened. The heroine explained with a smile that her daughter had left her a letter in which she wrote that having received the title and lands, she wanted to inspect her possessions as a noblewoman. He was perplexed by what had happened there without him. The Marquis shouted, how could he not stop his daughter? After hearing such nonsense, the woman ironically assured, how could he? She realized that he couldn't enter the south wing and meet her then, how could he stop her? Puzzled, the father asked again, what is this really? Why Marina acts like this? What nonsense? But the woman simply told the truth. So what's the problem? The man couldn't respond to this, and the mother realized that this hadn't happened in 9 years. For the first time, her daughter refused to do something. Daisy handed a letter to the heroine replying that Alicia had sent it to her. She called the woman mother. This was the main character's first request, so that's enough already. You can't raise children like they're tools. Jumping off the sofa, the Marquis declared that it was enough. He continued reminding that a noble born with a surname is obligated to serve the family, and declared he would send people to Echeverria to bring Alicia back. The man promised that in return, when he came back, he could freely enter the south wing. Marin sat upright without showing it, and when the hero definitely disappeared behind the door, she exhaled and thought, this time it's enough to stop her father. I wonder if Alicia has arrived yet or not. The golden door suddenly opened. She was greeted by servants and a woman who said to her, welcome. Everything was shining and looked luxurious. The main character was surprised. Petronella Rocas introduced herself and said she would help the lady with etiquette training and palace adjustment. Smiling, Alicia said she didn't expect such a warm welcome, and thanked Count Rocas for the warm welcome. The woman reported that by order of His Highness, the Duke, a room had been prepared to rest. After the trip, pointing to the heroine, she said that from now on Annie would serve Miss Annie. She sweetly replied that she would show the lady the room along the way. The girl said that upon hearing of the lady's arrival, everyone got excited and tried to decorate the castle so she would feel comfortable grabbing the huge handle with both hands. The heroine said that was the lady's bedroom. Alicia, smiling, asked if the lady liked it. After looking around, the main character assured that the room was simply beautiful. Annie bowed with a smile and said that if necessary, she could ring the bell. Looking out the window, the girl thought that that was Bernardo Wells's latest creation. A beautiful place worthy of its fame. Daisy called her and asked, Miss, aren't you going to Echeverria? And she hesitantly said it was the same. It's not a destination at all, but a capital. Smiling, the main character commented that there was little time left for the title conferment ceremony, so how could she get to Echeverria and back in time? And suggested to her friend that they go shopping. She clumsily asked again what Alicia said they had arrived in the capital and needed to have fun. She entered the studio and noticed that all the perfume bottles looked luxurious. As expected previously, the main character couldn't even imagine the capital and even a perfume studio. Normally, she locked herself in the library with books, but now she's trying perfumes. The workshop employee prepared the perfume by dropping a few drops from a pipette onto a piece of paper. The girl tested them with her eyes closed. A girl approached them with a question. The lady likes the scent. The red-haired heroine introduced herself as Katrina. The perfumer named Alicia knows that this girl will soon shake the empire with her perfume series. This woman will set the fashion. After bowing, she said she couldn't resist asking if that was rude and apologized. Alicia thought that the series that Katrina was creating was the future and that it was necessary to establish contact with her in advance. Then she replied that she found the scent very subtle and that its intensity changed depending on her body odor, as if it had been created especially for her. The girl exclaimed enthusiastically that she was glad her idea had been captured. Precisely, smiling, the protagonist said that she was happy to meet such a talented perfumer. Then she will take this wonderful perfume, and also next time she will want to try her perfume on her property. Behind the smile hid insidious thoughts that this commoner could not refuse, and would create a perfume under a noble name. Bowing slightly, Katrina declared it was an honor for her. The loud sound of heels was heard. Daisy was surprised because she didn't know that the young lady knew so much about fragrances. She smiled and thought she was just pretending because she knew Katrina would definitely succeed. Everything I heard and learned helped me speak the truth, because in the capital, if I showed ignorance, I would be trampled. Alicia honestly admitted that she didn't understand what was so good about it. It seemed she had no taste for those things. But was it really that convincing? The maid replied that the lady seemed to have lived there all her life. She replied that it was okay that we had to hurry because there were still many places to visit. The main character in stole dresses bought several jewels, pointed out several boxes with jewelry to be able to buy absolutely everything. Not a single pretty fan ended up in the boxes. There were more and more of different shapes and different colors. The servants bowed when the lady left the shops, and expressions of gratitude were heard. The heroine's face showed tiredness. Alicia asked if Daisy was very tired, and she assured her she was not. But the main character understood she was lying and asked her to be patient a little. After all, there was only one last place left. The man with gloves carefully cut the leather shoe, studying its internal structure closely. Noticing the customers, he asked how he could help them. The girl said she came to order an embroidery. The hero explained that this workshop was on the second floor. Judith shouted, a guest shouted, Judith, a guest. A girl happily went down the stairs and exclaimed, Judith, yes, uncle, she shouted with a smile. Embroidery workshop upstairs. The girl, apologizing for the mess, promised to prepare tea. She pointed out that if she had known about the guest's visit, she would have cleaned in advance, but lately she hadn't had time for the workshop. The lady replied that it was fine. The workshop looked very cozy. Handing her the tea, the heroine thanked her for her words. Judith Perlman introduced herself and shyly admitted she had little training and wasn't sure about the proper greetings. The lady also introduced herself and said she had heard about her embroidery skills and asked if she accepted personal orders. Blushing, she assured she didn't have such talent. For rumors to spread, Alicia asked Daisy to get that thing moving the package. The main character said she had already brought the sketch. Judith, looking at it, asked her, embroider like this? No. And then turning the page, she saw a poster. Alicia immediately asked the maid to leave for a while. The girl grabbed the bundle and the lady's voice was heard, saying that for now only she knew there was nothing to worry about. Listened with concern. How many circles had to be made to not reveal the real objective? Judith clenched the scissors behind her back, and the lady, unaware of the attention, continued telling how poor and naive Daisy had suffered because of this whole story. The girl offered to give Daisy some shoes, since there was a shoe store downstairs at that moment. The heroine lunged at her, shouting who she was while waving her fan. The woman admitted he was the most famous person in the capital. At that moment hit Judith on the wrist. Her hand trembled with pain. The only heir of the largest information network on the continent, the Croa clan. The scissors bounced, and Alicia said Judith Perman. She asked who this woman was with the strength of a bull, all radiant. The protagonist admitted she wanted to be her friend. 6 heads, including the master, governed the Croa clan, but somewhere in that basket there must be a sharp knife. What Judith thought 8 years ago. 6 farms and businesses near the capital burned simultaneously. Upon hearing this, the heroine looked at Alicia in shock, and then the memories appeared before her eyes. The 6 families that were attacked were the Council of 6 that governed the Croa clan. The girl cried through tears to be let go. Because her mom and dad were still there, the man hugging her insisted through tears. It was already too late. But at least she had to survive, because that was the only way to change anything. Looking at the burning house, she said she didn't want to. The fire grew even stronger, and finally the wooden house collapsed. They said no one survived. But in one single house, the body of a little daughter was not found. Judith grabbed the knife and shouted, "Stop!" and pointing it at Alicia, told her to leave immediately. She continued coldly, saying that the clan Croa no longer existed. Unafraid of the knife, the main character said, "If she runs and hides, so this clan will really disappear." The girl shouted angrily what she knew, but suddenly Alicia said she knew who betrayed Croa. And Judith was left paralyzed. After asking her again what she had said, the protagonist repeated, moving the knife to one side, that she knew who had betrayed Croa. She promised to help take revenge. The heroine asked incredulously why the lady wanted to help her opening her fan. She repeated that she wanted to be her friend, and if it comes to that, then a friend who brings benefits. She whispered that outwardly Croa is formed by a council of 6 heads, but there is also a secret council known only by the clan master, and these 6 hidden heads are the traitors of Croa. The girl was surprised. Could this be true? Alicia said that, and now it is the heroine who will become the clan master. Smiling, she continued saying it was better to resolve everything quickly, otherwise she wouldn't have time to do anything and would really die. Judith became cautious, wondering if the location had been revealed. Alicia said the embroidery must be finished by spring, and remembered that it is also necessary to determine the location. If she needs anything, she should write to Lutheran Castle before Judith had time to stop her and ask something else. The main character disappeared without a trace. The girl got scared and wondered if she might be some kind of crazy person. The heroine went downstairs and ordered to return, and Judith tried to find out what had happened. 2 young girls came out from under the table and asked if they could leave and if the guests had left. The girl answered that it was possible and apologized for taking so long, and then asked Flora to call her uncle, and immediately went to Agnes to prepare for the trip. She looked down and said she would get ready now. The heroine noticed a change in the girl's mood. Kneeling, she asked if she really didn't want to leave. The little girl answered that she didn't care, because if she didn't leave, the girl would be in danger. Hugging Agnes, she apologized because of her fault. They were only suffering. But this would be the last time, Judith promised, she excited. Asked if it was true that now she wouldn't have to leave without saying goodbye to her friends, the heroine, smiling, answered that as soon as everything was over, she would make sure that never happened again. The man entered the room and asked if she had finally made a decision. This is Uncle Bran. He was the one who saved little Judith, taking her out of the burning house and hiding her in his home. The heroine addressed him, calling him uncle, and admitted she wanted him to become the master, exhaling. He answered that Judith herself knew what he meant because he was just a shoemaker. The girls hugged him, calling him dad. And the girl wondered uncertainly if she could, taking her hands. Bran answered that everything depended only on her choice. And whatever decision she made, she must remember she would always receive support and her uncle would always support her. The girl finally began to smile again. Judith decided to act quickly, and the embroidery had to be finished by spring. Lutheran Castle built in eclectic style, a maid walked slowly down the great hallway holding a tray with a letter in her hands. While the girl twirled in her elegant dress, she heard Miss Imani. She apologized for coming during class. But could she come in? The woman calmly replied that she was just in time since today's dance class had ended. The lady thought she didn't mind that it was so quick, but what happened? Annie reported that what Miss Lisa had been waiting for had arrived, an invitation to the court's enthronement ceremony, and along with it came another letter. The main character was surprised. What kind of letter was this? The Imperial Palace. Shone under the bright rays of the sun, His Majesty was informed that Archduke Tezen had arrived sitting in a chair. He asked if he had seen the request. Upon signing, the hero replied yes, reinforcements for the western border troops. And this is somehow too sudden for the Archduke. The troops are no longer enough, asked the Emperor of the Leonhardt Empire, Rena Luca. Richard replied that in Tezen there had always been a shortage of people, and added that the starving nomadic tribes were raiding the villages. The emperor declared that there were already enough soldiers in Tezen and warned that other nobles would protest. Looking away, he said firmly, almost distant. Even if he was his younger brother, no means no, and lately those guys have been acting suspiciously. Renee looked at the main character with surprise and then asked if it was true. The man replied it was a report from Rothsmith. He responded thoughtfully that if it was Assistant Roderick, he could be trusted. After this, the man was silent for a couple of seconds and announced that the Archduke's request would be approved. With a slight bow, Richard thanked His Majesty. The Emperor said coldly that the hero should be grateful. Now at least he knew how much he would have to suffer because of the nobles, and still after the story of that damned title-giving ceremony, he couldn't find peace for several days because of this. Renee fought with Leonor, and for 5 days they slept in different rooms. Richard asked calmly if the Empress was very upset. Leonor suffered a lot in the capital where no one knew Count Echeverria. They tried to find out something through her. He declared angrily that all this was because of his younger brother. While they slept in different rooms, he had to make a great effort to calm her. The Emperor asked how the Count was. He seems to have adapted well to Rudern, exhaling. Renat noticed that was not what he was asking. As soon as the Count turns 18, they must marry officially. The father said Lady Alicia was still young. But the Emperor said he understood his concerns, but he didn't say they should marry right now. Lost in his thoughts, he calculated that the lady was now 17 years old, and yes, within 2 years it will be possible to marry when she turns 19 years old. In 2 years they will have time to get closer, and the Marquis will have time to prepare himself mentally to marry off his beloved youngest daughter. It's not a good idea, Renat. He asked why the man had such a displeased face. The Marquis really doesn't want to become a relative of the imperial family, he answered calmly but firmly. How was it possible? Because it was a great honor to receive such an opportunity. Smiling, the Emperor asked them to treat him well in the future. And what Renat said was just an attempt to appease the Marquis. He slammed his fist on the table and shouted that he didn't know Ricardo would suddenly decide to hand over Echeverria if he received the title and dissolve that marriage. Not even he could do anything, the Emperor exclaimed, annoyed that the protagonist had fallen in love with a woman so late. And now he wasn't listening to what his older brother said. Richard stood up and declared confidently that he was a man who wouldn't mind giving up Echeverria instead of wasting time on this. It would be better to deal with the storytellers he has spread throughout the capital, because now there are even rumors that he brandished an axe and kidnapped Lady Alicia. The hero exclaimed irritably that all this was happening because of his bad reputation, because Renat had clearly ordered that the story be spread as the love of the century. The man looked at him silently. The Emperor simply looked away awkwardly and coldly told his older brother he was leaving, but grabbing the handle he stopped upon hearing someone call him. Renee calmly stated that immediately after the end of winter and the change of year, Lua would rise, so he should be careful. The protagonist said he would remember, and closed the door behind him. The Emperor relaxed on his throne. What should he do, he thought. Turning to his younger brother, the butler asked if their conversation had been pleasant. The protagonist answered calmly, reinforcements of troops had already been promised in Tezen, and the lady could come there in winter, so they wouldn't show her anything bad. Fortunately, the butler stated with emphatic respect that the one who personally sent a letter to His Highness and even proposed marriage was not an ordinary 17-year-old boy, and after the change of year and summer he would turn 18. The perfect age to marry. Didn't he say, Your Majesty, that we marry when the lady turned 18 years old? Richard asked coldly. If he was also the Emperor's spy, he chuckled. His constant caution is completely justified. But, Your Majesty, the Emperor has been wishing for his marriage for more than a day. Henrik also declared that Lady Josephine had recently become engaged and added that His Highness was late, crossing his arms over his chest. He said there would be no wedding with Lady Alicia. Suddenly at that moment the main character called him. She was standing behind them. The protagonist's eyes opened in surprise. The girl said with a smile that she saw the Tezen coat of arms and came and realized it had been a long time since they last saw each other. There was silence for a while. He was afraid the heroine would hear his words that there would be no wedding with her, but Alicia only asked, surprised, why the main character was silent. He breathed a sigh of relief and thought that apparently she hadn't heard him. Upon getting off the carriage, he said he didn't expect to find the lady there, and that he didn't expect to find her there, nor what matter he had tried to reach in the imperial capital. The main character answered calmly, His Majesty the Emperor himself summoned her, sent her a letter, and wants to meet with her before granting her the title. The older brother, having decided that forcing the marriage didn't work, had to resort to threats. Richard reminded him that he had promised to find those same cufflinks that she had wanted back then and send them to her as a gift. It is at his capital estate where those jewels are precisely kept. He will give them to the Emperor to see if the girl would like to go with him. The heroine exclaimed that she would go, and they were already at the Tezen estate. Upon opening the box, the man said calmly that in Tezen they rarely process jewels. They say the estate's craftsmen were very inspired. She admitted mentally that since it was land territory, she didn't expect much from the magical stones. She didn't expect such size. I wonder if the small jewels around are also magical stones. Richard asked if she liked them, and Alicia, pulled from her thoughts, answered yes, and observed with a smile that the rumors that in Entesen diamonds rolled through the rivers and small jewels were scattered everywhere turned out to be true. Blushing slightly, the main character said it really was so beautiful she wants to swallow it right now and take possession of the power inside. The man said that in the lower part of the river that connects with the swamp, there really are gold deposits, although not as much as the rumors say. He explained that to extract gold, you have to know how to read the terrain and have the right tools. Gold flows in the rivers. Diamonds hide in the mountains, and for a land known as the land of death, everything seems too much like paradise. She declared, dreamily determined that she definitely wanted to visit Tezen someday. The servants entered the room and said that tea and refreshments were ready. While drinking tea, Richard said that after the coronation ceremony he would go immediately to Tezen. There would be a banquet after the title-granting ceremony, and there would be no time to talk. So he suggested saying goodbye in advance. The girl was surprised why so suddenly after the engagement. She asked when he would return to the capital. The protagonist answered that it would be sometime late, next spring, and if he needed to contact her, he would send a messenger. This is somehow too inefficient. Alicia thought the heroine, she radiant, also suggested going to Tezen. But the man replied that Rudin wasn't bad either, but that the south of Echeveria was more suitable for spending the winter. Alicia thought nervously, why not tell him immediately that she didn't want her to come to Tekken? The girl started yelling at him because she was going to do that, but suddenly she fell silent, thinking they were engaged, and that there would be many opportunities to achieve it. She continued calmly, saying she would keep it in mind in the carriage. The main character said they would see each other at the title conferment ceremony. She described in advance that she would wear a dress of reddish-purple color, and that she would have her hair pulled back without lifting it. The man replied that he would keep it in mind. And Alicia is looking forward to her formal outfit. The main character immediately wanted to dress in something discreet. But the butler declared with a slight reproach that this time it was impossible to wear whatever she had on hand. Richard replied that in that case, he would wear the Golden Order of Chivalry uniform on the day of the title conferment ceremony. Carriages arrived one after another at the luxurious castle. The man asked if she was worried, and Alicia replied a little. The girl also asked about the order of the ceremony, how to enter, and what happened afterward. Richard replied calmly that she should go to the center of the room, and there was no need to worry. After all, today she is the main heroine. They held hands as announced. His Highness the Grand Duke of Tezen and Lady Alicia, daughter of the Marquis. Whispers immediately began. The face turned out to be more innocent than expected, and the angelic woman suddenly found herself engaged to Satan with an axe, the jewel. It is about the Duchess Margarita's ruby set. I fell in love at first sight and really got carried away, and after all the gifts, a title is also granted. But the appearance is really worth it. After bowing, the protagonist said respectfully that it was an honor for her to meet such noble people. She said with a slight smile that she was glad to meet someone who is now more famous than him in the capital, and ordered the girl to come closer, passing the sword over his shoulder. The emperor said solemnly, from now on, as Countess of Echeveria, serve the good of the empire. Today is a day truly joyful. A new Count Echeveria has been born. It was announced with a smile that the youngest finally had found a life partner and had gotten engaged. Count Echeveria had been accepted into the imperial family, pointing to his brother. René congratulated him on finding a life partner. Then he turned to the huge chest and declared it was his engagement gift. He hopes the gift is pleasing. The chest opened and a snow-white fabric appeared. The couple froze, staring at the gift. It was a veil that is held in the imperial family only for important ceremonies, emphasizing the significance of the moment. The lady was only engaged, but they were already trying to secure her finally as a member of the imperial family. The intentions were too obvious. Then Alicia thought she heard voices. Some exclaimed, "Oh my god," others were surprised that the imperial house acted so actively. Even with the veil and the title, the imperial family seemed to recognize her. Truly, as a family member, it was said that His Majesty the Emperor loved his younger sister very much. But no one expected it to go that far. Although it was called an engagement, Countess Alicia was already considered the Grand Duchess of Tezen when suddenly, in response to rumors, the Duke called the girl. The Empress said she had heard that after the title ceremony, he would return to Tezen. The protagonist respectfully responded to His Majesty that yes, confirming his willingness to return immediately. So as not to leave the border unattended, the Empress commented sadly that seeing two people separate immediately after their engagement caused her great pain in her heart. Then, "What if we invite the Countess to Tezen?" Richard cautiously responded, wondering what she meant. But the Emperor exclaimed, "What a wonderful idea. Although Tezen is far, the two will not be alone on one side." The men applauded, saying it was a wise decision. The main character glanced at them sideways, and on the other hand, the women said it was very sad. When two people cannot go out after being engaged from the start, they created unnecessary tension. So that was their plan. But everything had already been decided a long time ago. The man realized he had nowhere to go, and turned to Alicia asking if the bride would accept moving to Tezen. The main character bowed happily. Anne responded that she agreed. The imperial couple applauded, the guests also filled with smiles and applause. That was the moment it was decided. Alicia Lane Vatterson heard the sharp noise of hooves. Several men on horseback shouted, calling Lady Alicia. One of the knights shouted to Roderick, reminding him that she was the first daughter in 200 years in the Northern Marcus family, and that she needed to be treated with the utmost care. A man who has never held anything heavier than a spoon said there was no need to boast about brute strength. Do not show off without satisfaction, even if resting every 3 steps. How can there be a fragile lady who rides? Faster than a knight. Looking around, the man responded irritably that he couldn't know, that the Countess turned out to be one of those people. They sped up as fast as they could. The order was given to bring His Highness immediately. After all, Alicia had entered a dangerous forest. He responded with disgust that they were already chasing the girl. The knight crouched before entering the forest. At first the girl was not visible, but then a silhouette appeared. The main character stood next to the horse and looked at something. The knight exclaimed that that was a forest and that entry into it was strictly forbidden. But she didn't seem to hear them. The man said she should leave the place immediately. The monster was reflected in the horse's eyes. He stepped on a branch and a characteristic crack was heard. The horse neighed and reared up. Drawing their swords, the knights shouted that it was them, and it's worth preparing for battle immediately. Magical beast Kukan, the hero, gritted his teeth and said, "Damn it, protecting the lady is his top priority, and his task is to hold out until the arrival of His Highness the Grand Duke." The man attacked the monster with fury. The knights fought the monsters, fiercely piercing them with a spear. But this didn't help much. These cracks did nothing to the wolves. One of the knights said, "This monster is blocked." The second hero looked at this scene with surprise. The pack circled around one of the heroes. He was ready to fight, with his spear aimed, but the wolf lunged at the man, growling threateningly. The spear flew to the side like a whirlwind and fell right at the main character's feet. The knight shouted to Lady Alicia to dodge. Since it was very dangerous, she grabbed the weapon and said with a smile, "A well-maintained spear." A monster was running toward her from behind, and the girl said with a smile she'd lend it for a minute. The man shouted at the top of his lungs behind her. Suddenly the lady disappeared from his sight after doing a somersault. She landed on top of the monster and she stood right on the monster's stone face. If you attack recklessly, the swords will simply become dull. That's why she leapt into the air during the fight, aiming at vulnerable points. Eyes, mouth, or cracks between the rocks where the sword could find a way through the armor. And finally, the crack began to glow with golden light and the monster shattered into 1000 stones. She ordered pickup. "All the black stones here until it's all over?" The knight asked, surprised what she meant, until it's all over. The girl explained they were kakans. They live in packs and don't attack individually. Each strike was more than just an attack. The swords clashed, and the air trembled with determination. And Alicia said firmly, "Daisy will wait, so let's finish this quickly." The angry wolves were already running toward them. The knights ran toward them in response as expected from the knights of Tessen. They understand everything quickly and learn fast, and the girl thought, turning to look at them. At this rate, surely it will all end quickly. Suddenly the kakan stepped on the spear with its paw and it broke under its strength. The main character froze in surprise. Why did it break in the first place? The man wielded a heavy double-bladed axe, and the sun's rays slid over his sword, foreshadowing the decisive blow. The monster broke into pieces, and the axe ended up right at the main character's feet. Through the ruined monster, she recognized his lordship. He only said Alicia, and running toward her, he grabbed her by the shoulder. Worried, he asked if she was okay. The main character was surprised and silent, and then with a smile declared that she was completely fine, pointing at a bunch of stones. Asked if there were more of those things left. Richard exhaled and said with relief, "Fortunately, she was not hurt." Later would tell more about this forest. After this, he headed to the knights Roderick and Oliver. The knights of Tessen are not capable of protecting even a single person, and added angrily that he would not hold anyone responsible for the fact that the future duchess ended up in the forest, but what they saw today must be kept secret. The main character asked them not to forget to take the stones if they have to return to the castle. Then they will go together to the main castle of Tessen. I remembered the words of the main character that the countess would go to Villa Lilia. Daisy asked how the girl could say that if that villa was a gift and she had to stay there. Alicia noticed indignantly that the maid should be on her side. It has been a month since she arrived at Tessin. Since then, she never saw the great hero again and remained expectant. Day after day she dealt tiredly with the endless line of those who dreamed of seeing at least a glimpse of the great Duke's bride's face. Guests from the Graves family enter. Prague, the hero, stood up and said, "Finally, it's your turn, you should hurry," and they entered the living room. Behind the butler, but one of them turned around and did not follow the butler but turned the corner. His pace quickened, and then he started running. Once they entered, the rest assured it would go like clockwork. It was the first-class assassin Grayson Beck sitting behind the column silently through heard that it was her. A young illiterate from the north, and naturally her internal security situation is very bad. They asked her what it was and she quickly answered, "A gift, which will turn the castle owner into a follower of the heretics," and then he turned around surprised. After receiving a slap, he turned pale. Apparently the hero did not expect this. He fell to the ground and with him the cross that the hero was hiding in his hand. Alicia picked him up from the ground and said there were too many visitors today. There was an estate under the night sky. A slight creak of glass doors was heard. A dark silhouette entered the bedroom from the balcony. The girl was sleeping when a shadow loomed over her. Having ruled the night, thought the stranger. The target is confirmed, and when he raised the knife high and threw it at the main character, his eyes opened wide. The man was surprised by what happened and received a strong blow on the hand. The knife flew around the room spinning and fell into Alicia's hands, and she asked him if he knew how many night guests had already arrived at his house, and getting up from the bed declared that she didn't care about their arrival. But one must have conscience and at least let them sleep. The hero became cautious and exhaled sharply. It was as if he knew something was wrong. The stranger said mockingly that the future Duchess was a monster since not a single assassin had returned. But this time more men were also consciously prepared. They climbed onto the balcony and he assured her that he knew how many first-class assassins were used to capture a girl, and this time she will not survive. Suddenly someone hit the hero from behind. He fell to the ground and behind him was the silhouette of a woman. The main character was surprised and the unknown woman said it seemed she was a little late. It turned out to be Judith, who said it's been a long time since we last saw each other. Turning to the lady, the girl came to deliver the embroidery that Alicia, the lady, cheerfully exclaimed the heroine's name. Caressing the fabric of the dress, said that everything was perfect just as she had requested. And she was right to entrust this to Judith. With a slight feeling of pride, the girl was glad that her lady was pleased. And she suggested dealing with this man, the assassin said with an unpleasant smile. At least he knows how many members are in his clan. The heroine ordered to silence him. Then Alicia calmly asked who her client was. She explained that no action could be taken to obtain information about the clients, but the girl said confidently that the client was the family of the male Grades, who for a long time desired the position of Grand Duchess for his daughter. At first his plan was to accuse her of heresy and strip her of her title. But Lady Alicia did not submit to someone else's will, so they resorted to radical measures. Did they really think this would work? Judith apparently would not have accepted this order in her place. The clan master was not competent enough. The main character commented with a wonderful smile, "Now the girl is a true master of the Croa clan." The assassin asked, surprised, "What Croa? Could it be that this young woman is the new master who revived the Croa clan? And if the master comes to her personally, then she is an unusual aristocrat." Rising from her chair, the protagonist said, "Well then." The cruelty of some aristocrats crossed her mind. The girl approached the hero in slippers and said that the culprit of this incident should remove the uninvited guests. The main castle of Tessin. The question was heard if he had been killed. Tea splashes into a patterned container. The main character looked up and then she calmly replied that not yet. The man responded that he would assign a cleaner who from now on would eliminate the consequences of unwanted guest visits. Richard warned that if absolutely necessary this was acceptable, but one should not complete tasks on their own. That is, don't bury them, because getting rid of the buried parts is even more complicated. The girl was stunned, wondering if that was all her fiancé wanted to tell her. No apologies or questions if it's okay? What was granted to the future Duchess exceeded expectations, and therefore similar incidents will repeat. And it's worth strengthening the security and escort of Lalisa's palace, anticipating possible threats. Alicia exhaled nervously, but for him this is normal, spent his entire life under oppression, where they tried to contain him, and the threat to the bride's life was something taken for granted. Part of the usual reality. The girl replied that that was enough, that he should take care of it however he wanted. But she endured it for the love of His Highness, and realized how more and more people despised her. The table cracked under Alicia's finger pressure. And the main character asked if he had the right to act as he wished. A fire burns in the dark sky. Thick smoke envelops the palace's golden dome, and the flames approach threateningly toward its majestic arches. Screams were heard in the hallway. "Save yourself." The girl stretched and thought, it's not a day of peace. Then she heard the bedroom door open. Two maids were at the threshold calling for their lady to come out quickly, and they shouted there was a fire in the Emerald Tower. Covering her mouth with a wet napkin, she asked again, "Fire?" She thought about it, because not even in her worst fears could she have imagined that the enemies would decide to set fire to the castle. The knight was already standing with the carriage at the threshold and waiting for the lady. He explained that due to the risk of the fire spreading, they first had to evacuate and head to the main castle of Tessin. Alicia calmly ordered them to leave. They rode silently with the maids. Thinking about what had happened, shouts were heard from the street stop. The two strangers were warned that if they moved, the knights would attack, and they had to identify themselves upon dismounting from their horse. The knight asked again who they were. The clan master declared they were friends of Lady Alicia, and that if they called Judith, she would understand everything. The lady jumped out of the carriage and ran. She ordered everyone to step back. The lady assured the knight that everything was in perfect order. She reported that the palace was attacked by the men of the Count Combat, and although she hurried to help this time, she arrived too late. Alicia asked who this count was. Judith explained that Count Combat wanted to eliminate the lady and put his daughter, Lily, in her place. Apparently, he decided that Tezin was a barren land where it was easy to disguise everything as an accident. The main character thanked Master Perlman and said he had a new task for him. He ordered that everything be found out about the 6 great families, Geronimo Strahl and Morokov and Combat, stating that the price did not matter. With a bow, he replied that this was not an order but a request from a friend of the clan. The main character handed over a bag of grape or sea pearls valued at least 30,000 gold, and the rest you can spend on a snack. Fortunately, the fire was extinguished in 20 minutes. The butler reported that only the outer wall of the tower was damaged. The damages were minor and there were no casualties. The protagonist said the fire should be declared an accident and ordered to locate the arsonists and eliminate them to prevent recurrence. The man bowed and hesitantly offered to dine with Lady Alicia, who had just arrived at the castle. Richard looked at him silently. The servants chatted at the table, insisting that the Grand Duke listen to them and admit that his father was right. And they insisted that the lady remain in the main castle for her safety and asked to reconsider the decision. Alicia was surprised that even during dinner the servants kept reporting, turning the conversation into a moral lesson. The man approached his girlfriend with an offer to stay in the main castle until the Lilith Palace renovation was completed. He explained that due to the arrival of outsiders during the renovations, it would be more difficult to provide security. She was not against it, but mentally she was happy for the chance to go hunting. Every day, the man ordered the lady and her servants to stay in Tech House, and Alicia was surprised the man sternly warned that entry to Breck House would be prohibited in 2 days and ordered not to leave Tech House. The woman thought disapprovingly about how she could avoid meeting the lady for an entire month. She asked hesitantly if she really couldn't even go for a walk. Richard replied that even if she wanted to, she couldn't. Getting up from the table, he said he had an urgent matter and had to leave. The man expressed relief because she was not hurt and advised me to rest after the incident. He also asked her to make sure to lock the door when going to sleep. Alicia responded briefly, okay. And in her mind she was already crying. Because she was in the main castle and couldn't go hunting, the advice about the door came back to my memories. Yes, he says strange things, thought the girl while cutting the chicken. The servant said he was a uptight person and that he was horrible near the bookshelf. A faint light from a lamp was burning. The man was filling out a document. When suddenly something went wrong, the main character felt a cramp inside and began to cough. After that he started to fall, and after a few seconds he landed on the floor with a thud. The servant who was outside the door heard it immediately. Richard was bleeding from the mouth and couldn't catch his breath. A quick knock was heard on the door, shouting, "Your Highness?" The man simply yelled at him to leave. The man, holding back his emotion, asked to be called if His Highness needed him. But the main character just said he was fine and suddenly fell silent. The knife sank into Richard's hand. Cold sweat ran down his face. Surprisingly, the wound healed very quickly. Slowly the hero got up from the floor and thought he needed to return to the room while his mind was still clear. The story of generations of torment, similar to the punishment passed down to 26-year-old Richard among his ancestors, were those who turned to countless doctors. In a desperate attempt to suppress years of agony, some turned to prayers, while others turned those prayers into curses. Others, unable to bear the torment, they destroyed everything around them, even themselves. But nothing helped. Over time, the pain became so strong that they couldn't even move. When Lua got up in the 2nd month, torments began that neither poison nor medicine could relieve. Taking medicine was nothing more than a simple and bitter ritual. Then Ricardo, cursing the deceased emperor for the blood he had given him, wondered if it would have been easier if he had killed him while he was still alive. He was full of bitterness. The childless emperor granted him the title of descend, condemning him to eternal torment, not granting power but a burden. For 10 long days the agony continued until Lua finally stood up. The main character only wanted to kill everyone. Rainy dawn at the main castle. The girl entered, taking off her hat. A servant greeted her. She asked if his lordship had not yet woken up. The man explained that his lordship was not feeling well, so he would have to return today. Alicia asked if the doctor had come, and they answered yes, he is not in the best condition and has already fallen asleep. He rarely got sick, so he didn't like to have anyone nearby at those moments. The servant was very sad, because the lady had to travel so far in such terrible weather, and in vain. Alicia said she shouldn't feel guilty, and asked if Richard had fallen asleep a long time ago. The hero replied that not much time had passed. The girl said her clothes got wet on the way and asked if the protagonist would mind if they rested a bit before leaving. The servant said it was not advisable to stay with wet clothes in such cold weather, but added that his lordship's feelings were still unknown. The main character said he would personally check on Richard's condition while the maids rested. The man was nicknamed a demon. His wounds disappeared without a trace even after the sword and arrows, but even he managed to get sick. It doesn't seem like he was attacked or poisoned, but the servant's behavior doesn't seem normal to him. The girl said everything was fine, and that she herself would go there. The servant, not daring to object, invited my lady to follow him. The heroine was surprised that there wasn't a single servant beside the duke, no guards or sign of the night. I wonder if it's because of sensitivity during illness or if there's another reason. She silently looked at her fiancé. Holding the handkerchief in her hands, she thought even he has moments like this. The main character wiped the sweat from the man's forehead and he was burning up completely now that I think about it. Even at their first meeting, the man covered his face with his hand and didn't seem very healthy. But then Richard felt better when the girl took his hand. This touch really eases the pain. But then why is there no one by his side? The servant asked if the lady was already leaving, and she answered yes. She will come again tomorrow, but at an earlier hour. The man distrusted this statement. The main character was sleeping lightly on his back. The door creaked and began to open slowly. Richard appeared in the doorway, slowly entering the room. Alicia continued sleeping. The main character looked at her silently as if afraid to do something. The heroine suddenly frowned slightly and opening her eyes asked what his lordship was doing there. The man looked down and apologized. Leaning toward her, he apologized again and told her it might be confusing, but he begs for her hand. The hero looked quite pained. The girl jumped up and said, "Your Highness," their hands intertwined, and Richard asked her not to let go. Alicia blushed slightly but said nothing. The hero also blushed and apologized again. And suddenly he fell, apparently falling asleep. The girl tried to call him, but it was all useless. She had to leave him herself. The rays of the sun appeared outside the window. Richard opened his eyes and was surprised. For the first time in a long time, he felt no pain. Alicia continued holding his hand, although she doesn't remember ever going to bed. Could such a fragile girl really carry a sleeping man? This is quite surprising. As soon as I took the heroine's hand, the pain disappeared. Stop the damn punishment with just this. It was clearly a gift from God, he thought while stroking. Alicia suddenly murmured something frightened. The man moved away. The main character rubbed his eyes and made sounds, coughing, stretching. He began to say, "By the way, yesterday this man," and then stared at his hands to see if he really had let go of them. Suddenly Richard's voice was heard. He said it wouldn't be scary if you let him pass for a while. Alicia asked how the main character felt. The man took her hand and awkwardly replied that she should ask the girl how she felt. Was comfortable sleeping? She smiled and replied that she was fine. It seems the atmosphere has changed. Is he really so embarrassed just because they were holding hands, frowning? Richard said he knew it looked strange at that moment. Alicia shook her head and said not at all. It's not that it's strange. She's just curious about what happened, he replied. Okay, but the girl will find out now. There's no need to tell anyone. Richard said he doesn't know the root cause, but the pain he feels like shackles and he can't live outside of Thyssen. The main character was surprised because last time he was in ruins interrupting, the man said that on the day of their first meeting, his condition was the result of having gone beyond the Thyssen. When his will was especially weak, and the real torment is happening now when the second moon of Lua rose. Richard felt such unbearable pain that it seemed he was dying, a burning pain, a pain like a knife. An oppressive pain all appearing at once, and the hero can't even get help from a doctor. Alicia sighed and turned to His Highness. But he only asked her not to make that face because the main character found someone beautiful. The girl asked who it was. The man remained silent for a moment with a slight smile. Alicia exclaimed with a smile. Could it really be her? She continued, saying that just as she had proposed a deal to him, he also wanted to make her an offer. As long as she is in Thyssen when he is suffering, it's worth holding hands. The hero promised to fulfill any wish of Lady Alicia. As long as it did not affect the imperial family, everything else is unimportant. But fighting the imperial family is quite problematic. The heroine smiled but said, if not the imperial family, anything can she ask for something in return every time he holds her hand or just once? Richard said that the discussion and decision should depend on the magnitude of the request, and since they are holding hands, she should speak up if she wants something. Exclaimed a set of aquamarines from Lilissa's palace. The hero chuckled and commented that he could do that. Every time they held hands, the girl thought with delight that he was willing to give such a treasure simply for the touch of her hand, but in return the man would add one more condition. She exhaled. Thinking she couldn't have gotten something so valuable so easily, he claimed that the pain would disappear with his touch. But neither the emperor nor his direct heirs should know about it. She was surprised why. Because the imperial family are her relatives, Richard replied that if word got out she would be named Grand Duchess of Thyssen immediately, and therefore he wanted the agreement to last as long as possible. The girl was surprised. What does this mean? The protagonist remained silent for a while and then told Alicia sternly not to marry him. Alicia was completely astonished. Just yesterday, with a face like she was about to cry, he asked me to hold his hand. And now he doesn't want to marry. It's absurd. What does he intend? If to him Alicia is a human painkiller, then he should at least pretend to love her and beg her to marry him. She was rejected, and rejected so decisively she held the hand of the person who found her in her room after waking up but was ultimately rejected. Now that I think about it, it's not the first time the same thing happened at the first meeting, so Richard only gets desperate when he needs Alicia. She stomped her foot and shouted, "Ungrateful man!" The maid pointed out that His Highness the Grand Duke usually stays alone when he is sick, but he spent the whole day with the lady, which means he really liked her. Annie said that if the lady visited him again today, everyone would finally be convinced of her importance to him. She replied that soon rumors could start spreading, that when His Highness is not well, he can't do without Lady Alicia. Suddenly the main character shouted that that was not true. The maids trembled with fear. Annie said with a guilty feeling that she had simply imagined that the lady had developed a good relationship with His Highness. The girls walked slowly in the rain. The lady with the umbrella, the maids with raincoats. Daisy broke the silence by admitting that although Annie had said it lightly, the truth was she admitted she was a little happy to see His Highness accepting care only from one lady. The maids whispered that she was the only one who visited His Highness, and apparently she loved him much more than the others. Annie got angry and told the lady not to worry, that she didn't understand anything. Looking up, the girl thought, that's right, and she herself was already thinking about suspending these visits to the sick man. But Alicia still wanted them to continue rumors about her intimacy with the Grand Duke, hoped people would think that the Grand Duke was madly in love and couldn't live without her. Only this fact could calm the main character. The girl cautiously looked inside the room and called His Highness. The hero was writhing in pain in bed. He looked very exhausted. The main character fell to her knees and apologized for being late. She asked worriedly what had happened after all. It was possible to take the hand away for a short while, smiling. The man replied yes, even if just for a while. The girl thought she would no longer be angry with the patient, and asked if the touch brought relief or not. Richard explained that at first the intense pain in the area where the hand rests disappears. Putting his hand on his forehead, Alicia asked if doing that would stop his headache. The main character said that holding hands was enough. The heroine withdrew her hand from his forehead. At that moment, the man intercepted her hand and asked that she not take her hand away. She thought about it while looking at him, pleading. It seems the recent resentment is fading. Alicia asked how long the effect lasted, and Richard replied that as long as they held hands, everything was fine, and if you let go, the pain will gradually return and be as strong as before. Why didn't he say that the pain returned as soon as she let go of his hand? He admitted he was grateful even for the brief relief. Although the more he thought about it, the sadder he became. Richard was suffering. Every time the moon rises, despite the strong body, the main character admitted she felt sorry for him. The man asked in that case the heroine would stay here for his unfortunate cause. Alicia said she was already here, to which he replied that his quarters were very far. Then he handed her a golden key. It was the key to the Duchess's quarters. She should show them to Henrik, and he will take the girl there. They are at the other end of the castle, but still closer than the heroine's current bedroom. According to her memories, the Grand Duke of Tesin had 6 wives, and he did not entrust the Duchess's bedroom to any of them. There were rumors that the Grand Duke kept these chambers intact because he already had another in his heart, and now this room was opened for Alicia. Clutching the key in her hands, she then remembered the words, "Richard trusts Alicia," when returning from the chambers. Richard trusts Alicia. Upon returning from the chambers, the character main complained why the castle was so big. The hero reported there was a secret passage between the Duke's and Duchess's bedrooms. She asked through tears why he was only talking about this now. On the 4th day, the man touched the bride's hair. The girl asked again. "Lua lasts 10 days, right?" Richard answered affirmatively and then turned to the heroine, asking her why she asked him to braid her hair this way is more convenient. The main character thought the method wasn't the easiest, said the girl could let go of his hand for a while, but Alicia said that was impossible, and that she couldn't explain why she braided her hair. Unlike His Highness, she had to wash frequently to maintain her dignity, but if she leaves, Richard will suffer pain. He said he was sorry. But the heroine explained she didn't say that to apologize, and thanks to the servants it's not so difficult, and then she thought hopefully. It seemed like she was the one who needed the Grand Duke the most. Finally, the man braided his hair, adding a ribbon as a finishing touch. Alicia asked if she could ask a question. Richard calmly allowed it. Lua lasts a full 10 days. How did he manage to endure all this time alone without her? She was surprised that His Highness, who was so often and seriously ill, still held the title of Invincible Warrior. The man asked again if she really wanted to know. Richard took his sword. The main character noticed this and struck the sword's hilt hard. The girl instinctively blocked the attack. He assured her he had no intention of harming her, but going was still out of the question, and at that moment, the main character cut her hand with a sword. Alicia was scared at first, but then noticed how the wound healed itself. Surprisingly, it healed on its own, and the heroine began to remember the times in hell. She admitted she had only relieved mild pain temporarily with a more severe one, and this didn't only refer to wounds. The man said he could go without drinking, eating, sleeping, and without feeling any discomfort. The girl realized she had had a similar experience. In hell, I wonder if this could be the case, that the main character also visited the underworld. She offered him a basin of water and turned to him. He looked at the girl questioningly, but Alicia, pursing her lips, thought it was better not to say something stupid and still needed time to put in order her thoughts. The hero admitted that everyone calls him a demon. He assured her he had never been to hell and that condition was not contagious, so she had nothing to worry about. The main character asked why he was talking about this. It's all because of the way the girl looks at him, the same look as last time. Alicia really looks at him with pity. The girl admitted maybe that was true. She realized that in hell she didn't feel hunger, and then truly realized she had died. Alicia couldn't get rid of her remorse and forced herself to eat dry crust and dirt. The heroine pushed them with difficulty down her throat. Although he knew they wouldn't be digested anyway, when he saw him suffer, his own suffering came to mind. The girl invited him to eat together. Although he wasn't hungry, the man was surprised as to why this was so. She smiled and reminded him that he had promised to do everything she asked of him as long as she held his hand. Or maybe he should have asked her to marry him. Richard said abruptly that he would eat it all and grabbed the spoon, but his hand was shaking violently. The main character asked him if he felt a lot of pain. The hero replied that it was simply his dominant hand, and the soup was spilling onto the plate. Understanding the reason, the heroine smiled and said, "Could the man please sit next to her?" Rule number 1, intense pain disappears at the point of contact, so the heroes ate and drank together. When they spent time together, they found a comfortable position to do things together. Richard told her about Tesin, about his surroundings, and about all that. He said that clans cannot enter the empire without passing through it. The girl asked if His Highness was well versed in this because he had already put together a puzzle like this. The man explained that he had seen those faces before, and it was easier for him. The members of the imperial family placed great importance on portraits and sometimes turned to dozens of artists in search of the right portrait. The Grand Duke is also from the imperial family, but he doesn't look anything like them, and Alicia will soon have to choose an artist for her portrait as well," said the hero. A scream was heard behind the door. "Your Highness, an urgent message from the capital." The Emperor never contacted Tessin during the Lua cycle and suddenly calls the Grand Duke. This means something strange is happening in the imperial palace. The journey from Tessin to the capital took 5 days, and the letter seemed calculated for the arrival of the great hero exactly on time. The woman was outraged because His Highness, being so sick, still had to immediately receive an urgent report in the capital. It stated that a woman pregnant by the Emperor outside the palace was taken to the harem to give birth there. If it had been an ordinary girl, it would have been just an affair. But we were talking about Lady Maud, the Chancellor's daughter. The Marquis of Manhwa realized that the Marquis of Manhwa was practically the sworn enemy of the Grand Duke of Tessin. She knew that if the Emperor took the Marquis of Manhwa's daughter as a concubine, it would become a serious threat to Tessin. Because of the incident, the imperial court, composed of 2 factions, began to lose balance. She knew that the Emperor's interests, who had long been without heirs, could not lean toward customs. No matter how great the Duke Tessin's devotion to the imperial family, if he opposed Lady Maud's entry into the palace, everything would change and he would not be able to count on the Emperor's protection. Alicia thought it was time for a new prophecy. The servant asked anxiously of His Highness not to exert himself too much and to get into the carriage. Richard had already prepared the saddle, knowing he was in a hurry to keep his promise and arrive as soon as possible. Suddenly a girl's voice was heard. She called out to His Highness. The man turned around and saw Alicia, followed by a servant carrying suitcases in his hands. Richard looked at the suitcase questioningly and then at the heroine, who said she would go with him and ordered the servants to leave them alone for a moment. The main character approached His Highness's face, and she said they would travel together in the same carriage. The girl remembered that the pain disappears in the places it touches. After 8 days, she discovered that the healing effect, although weakened, was still there, passing through the clothes, but it does not affect areas covered by skin. Richard assured that now everything was fine. But Alicia said that no matter what happened, he looked away. The buzzing in my head still hasn't disappeared. And beyond that, the situation only promised to get worse, therefore he could not hesitate. The main character was a little surprised. After all, the girl suddenly began to hug him and asked how he felt. She was referring to the sounds in his head. If they had become a little quieter, Richard answered yes. Alicia suggested that the larger the contact area, the stronger the healing effect would be, stroking his head. She whispered to him that in emergencies, this method could also be used. The man remained silent for a moment, then said there was no need for that. Before he could finish speaking, he found himself in the carriage. The main character knocked on the carriage door and said, "Come on." The weather outside was beautiful, but on the carriage path a shepherd appeared with sheep. The couple sat in silence. Suddenly Richard realized the girl was about to say something, and indeed Alicia turned to him. "If Lady Maud gives birth in the imperial palace, it will be His Majesty's first child," the protagonist said. He did not want her to give birth in the imperial palace, and the interlocutor understood why. If Lady Maud has a child when she becomes a concubine, that child will have the right to the throne, since the throne in this country passes to the emperor's firstborn. Alicia wondered if a child conceived outside the palace could not be recognized as imperial. A drop of tea slowly dripped from the cup, and when it fell on the girl's hand, she continued, saying that in any case, members of the imperial family have a royal mark with which this can be verified. The royal mark, a special birthmark that appears only on members of the imperial family. Exhaling, he declared that he also had the royal mark, and not only the brothers of His late Majesty. He pointed out that all the brothers of the current emperor had the royal mark, and asked if she understood. The girl answered yes, that she understood that the royal mark was actually an artificial birthmark. Members of the imperial family are injected with a special reagent so that the mark appears in the next generation. It is a mechanism designed to protect the imperial lineage. But it has a loophole. Alicia asked if Richard suspected His Majesty's brothers. Pointed out that if the concubine had relations with the emperor's brothers, it would be impossible to determine paternity. The tough characters of the Grand Duke will earn him enemies on all sides, which will undoubtedly bring problems. Alicia said she understood the desire for caution, but reminded that this was His Majesty's first child. She advised first sincerely congratulating the emperor, and not worrying in advance about the future, since it made no sense to go against his will. Bowing, she said a new season would soon begin and that she would give a new prophecy. The girl said, "Your Majesty," then suddenly flew forward because the carriage crashed into some rocks. Alicia continued, "Your Majesty, you will see for yourself." Richard's expression showed surprise. The first princess, main character, finished speaking while in the Duke's arms. They looked at each other silently and then in an instant realized their situation. And moving even further away from each other, they apologized. The man looked out a window and Alicia looked away. Mentally noting how hot it was, they traveled in the carriage for several days without resting, and the first thing they saw was the gloomy capital sky. A strange silence reigned in the imperial palace, like the calm before the storm. The decision about Lady Maud's entry into the palace was delayed, and the arrival of the Grand Duke Tessin made everyone tense. The Grand Duke, nicknamed the Monster, smiled alone, and the anxiety increased. The servant turned to the hero and asked him to go to the audience hall. Alicia called the man and told him not to forget what the girl had told him. The Chancellor, Marquis Manners, said that for the sake of the mother's health and the fetus's peace, it was necessary to expedite her entry into the palace. The constable and combat spoke together, one insisting on caution, calling the situation unprecedented, and the other reminding that the law is above all. He realized that the great hero Tessin had not yet arrived, and wondered if His Majesty was rushing too much. Since the question of the child's paternity remained open, unable to bear it, the emperor shouted enough. The servant reported that the Grand Duke of Tezen requested an audience. Everyone knew that the Grand Duke would surely oppose Lady Maud's entry into the palace. They considered him boring and a purist of formality, who in this had no equal. The hero was suddenly surprised he didn't understand what was happening to the Duke. Closing his eyes, he asked what the Grand Duke Tessen thought, but the emperor was obsessed with the thought of what was happening to Richard's face, and suddenly the main character announced that he congratulated His Majesty on the first child of his new daughter-in-law, expressed his hope that his daughter-in-law could enter the palace as soon as possible to find peace and prepare for the birth. So far, there has been one vote in favor and none against. Richard extended his hand forward forcefully with words. However, he remembered that even if a princess was born, the law of succession could not be ignored, and it was inevitable to talk about an heir. Alicia calmly pointed out that if one only looked at the law of succession, then indeed the problem with the heir would arise. Then Ricardo should be told that the acquisition of an heir by his brother meant peace for the entire empire, and it was a great joy for him. He admitted he could not deny the fact that his first nephew was conceived outside the palace walls, and admitted that in that scenario many questions would remain. Surrounding the birth of his first nephew, the pros and cons would be balanced. He ordered that it be announced that the child had been marked with the royal mark, asking His Highness to support the decision and put an end to the disputes. Count Esteban expressed his concern because a hasty recognition of the heir could cause controversy. Since the right of succession to the throne was at stake, he reasoned that it was precisely the members of the imperial family, sensitive to the issue of succession, who did not submit to the emperor's will, since without an heir, they had chances to take the throne. The man suggested discussing the matter later, if a son is born and in the case of a daughter, deciding that she would have no rights to the throne, and that was what Alicia said. Although the law of succession does not discriminate by gender, the eldest daughter has never ascended the throne. She recalled that unofficially the throne always belonged to the first child born of Empress Ricardo. He asked what would happen if the Empress never gave birth a son. The girl whispered that wouldn't happen, and suddenly covered her mouth with her hand as if she had said something unnecessary. The man froze for a moment, and then realized he would have many nephews. The emperor responded well with a smile and continued saying he perfectly understood the feelings of the hero and agreed to do exactly that. The emperor ordered Maud Manners to enter the palace, announced the royal mark, and wished that everyone would bless the birth of the child. Welcome to the imperial family, announced the man to the marquis. Sweat appeared on his face. It was clear that the marquis was surprised. The emperor wondered what this wind of change was. This is of course good news, but can really a person change so much just because of an engagement? The sound of heels was heard. Alicia was walking through the castle when suddenly something caught her attention. It was a portrait of a beautiful girl. The heroine's eyes lit up and she thought about how beautiful she was. Leonore of the Eastern Duchy, once nicknamed the Lady of the Spirit of the Sea, was widely known. She left her land and shone even in the empire, remaining a beautiful and talented prima donna, and the emperor was her ardent admirer, so Leonore became empress. 9 years had already passed. The main character was called by a maid who said the empress wished to see Lady Alicia. The large white and gold doors opened and the words were heard. Long time no see, Madam Empress. Leonore said that, having received the title, the main character should now be called Countess Echeverria.